So for those of you guys that have seen the Last Dance documentary, and by the way, I'm assuming that at least 80 to 90% of my following has seen the Last Dance documentary or is at least up to date with it, considering the fact that there is absolutely no basketball for us to watch. And this is pretty much the only little bit of NBA content that we could hold on to while we try to wade through these difficult times. But for those of you guys that have watched the Last Dance documentary, there's one thing I'm sure you guys may have paid attention to, and that's the fact that Michael Jordan still not only dislikes Isiah Thomas, but absolutely despises Isiah Thomas. I decided to do a little bit of digging because I was watching the Last Dance documentary like a lot of you guys, and I was thinking to myself, okay, what started this hatred between Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas? Is it literally just basketball related? Is it pettiness? Is it foolishness? Well, all rivalries always start with the same thing, and that's a slight little bit of pettiness. So what's going on, guys? Your boy TheFlightMike back again with another NBA video. Guys, a lot of you guys have been requesting me to pay more attention to NBA history now that there is no current NBA news and events to update you guys on, and I decided to finally listen to y'all. So to prove this concept and to let me know that this is something you want to see in the future, take a moment to leave a like to help this video grow and to help the channel grow. Also, if you are new to my channel, make sure you take a moment to subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'm also starting to regularly stream on Twitch on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. We had a pretty awesome stream last time, so I'm really excited about that. And I'm also doing a giveaway on my Instagram for $1,000. A link to that is also in the description down below. So there are a lot of rumblings about how this rivalry between Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas initially originated. And the common NBA fan would just say to you, okay, there's this little rivalry between the bad boy Pistons and Michael Jordan's Bulls, and The Last Dance does a great job telling you about this rivalry. The way it works is the Pistons clearly had significantly less talent than the Michael Jordan, Doug Collins Bulls, but what the Pistons had over the Chicago Bulls at that time was a significantly better scheme to stop the best player in the entire NBA, known as the Jordan rules. And the best way I could explain the Jordan rules, because they already do a good job explaining that in The Last Dance, is they did everything they possibly could to double and triple team Michael Jordan, and he was not able to get to the rim without taking a couple of hits from Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn. So bear in mind that this rivalry was only a rivalry from the 1988 to the 1991 season, and for the first 2 years of the rivalry, the one thing that the Pistons had over the Chicago Bulls was purely scheme. At that time, all you really had to do to stop the Chicago Bulls is stop Michael Jordan. And Doug Collins was open about his entire scheme: just pass the ball to Michael Jordan and move out of the way and have him carry us to championships. Pretty much a similar type of basketball, not 100% identical, but a similar philosophy to the one Mike D'Antoni puts around James Harden, only James Harden also creates for his teammates. Back in those days, Michael Jordan didn't really create for his teammates when Doug Collins told him just go out and score. He did, but again, it was very minimalistic. He wasn't dropping like 13 assist games the way we see James Harden do. So if you saw the Last Dance documentary, there's this one quote that completely resurrected this entire beef, and that's the fact that in the 1991 series, when the Chicago Bulls finally decimated the Detroit Pistons, and this is at the point where the Detroit Pistons were clearly past their prime. Isiah Thomas even openly admits it. They were clearly not the dominant team that they were, and the Chicago Bulls swept Detroit. It was no longer even a rivalry, and this was under Phil Jackson's second year as head coach of the Chicago Bulls. And then the Detroit Pistons famously walked off without shaking the Chicago Bulls' hand, and I can't believe this was even a crazy story in The Last Dance, because I'm going to be honest, I didn't think players were that sensitive. You know, handshake or not, you hated them before, you hate them after, you won, and you get to move on to the NBA Finals. But here's the strange thing for me. Apparently, the way this rivalry started is just a very small tale of jealousy. So John Sally came out and explained how this entire rivalry started. If you don't know who John Sally is, he is was a host of one of the best sports shows of the past decade, the best damn sports show period. But this is a dude that won 4 NBA championships. So also bear that in mind, because he not only won 2 NBA championships with the Detroit Pistons, but the 1996 Chicago Bulls also signed John Sally. So this man won championships with both Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, won championships with the Detroit Pistons, and he also technically won 2 championships with Phil Jackson, 4 championships in total. So he is probably the best voice to hear about this entire story. So this is how it goes. Isiah Thomas is going home and gets together with his family, and he sees his nephew is wearing a Bulls jersey. And not only any Bulls jersey, but a Michael Jordan Bulls jersey. He goes to the nephew and he says, "What are you doing?" And the nephew says, "Listen, we're in Chicago, that's my team." And this is Isiah Thomas's nephew. He was not really understanding that the great Isiah Thomas plays for Detroit, and we don't wear Chicago Bulls colors. You know, this is what we wear. You're Isiah Thomas's nephew, you rep Isiah Thomas. And then the nephew says, "I'm from Chicago, I'm down with the Bull movement." And this just drove Isiah Thomas crazy. And this was nothing personal against Michael Jordan, but in his brain, this triggered Isiah to say, "Listen, every time I play against Michael Jordan, I'm going to go off just so I could tell my nephew that this is the jersey you wear. You know, you wear Detroit Pistons colors and you come correct to family functions. You don't represent my arch rival at these events." Now, you could even point the finger at even earlier than this. You could even point the finger going all the way back to when supposedly Isiah Thomas fixed Michael Jordan's first All-Star game to be frozen out. Some players believe that, some players don't. And the reason why players do not believe that is because Isiah Thomas didn't have enough clout within all of the NBA players to do such a thing. Isiah Thomas wasn't the most liked guy. He was the leader of one of the dirtiest teams in the entire NBA. So whether he's a winner or he is not, whether he's a champion or he's not, most NBA players do not like Isiah Thomas. But this rivalry ran even deeper within Isiah. You have to understand the pain Isiah Thomas was feeling. This is a guy that's had more NBA championships than Michael Jordan at the time. You know, if we're saying that this story happened circa 1990, right before Michael Jordan's first championship, Isiah Thomas had 2 NBA championships, 1 NBA Finals MVP, and 12 NBA All-Star appearances throughout his entire career. Well, I guess we could say 9 prior to the year if we're talking about that year. So this is a guy that isn't just some regular Joe Schmo. This guy was an absolute freak of nature in the NBA. I think we need to take a moment to discuss how great Isiah Thomas was so you could get an idea. This is a guy that was 6'1" that was dominating the NBA during a time where guards weren't really the focal point of the NBA. If you're 6'1", you're not considered as a player that could carry a team. At the prime of Isiah's career, he was averaging 23 points per game, 2.5 steals per game, 8 assists per game, and 4 rebounds per game. This was his second year in the league, and again, he's a 6'1" guard. I don't think his entire career stats do him justice, because his past, his final 4 years were horrible, in my opinion. Well, compared to the rest of they weren't really the greatest. But my man finished with 19.2 points per game, 9.3 assists per game, 3.6 rebounds per game. You have to understand, Isiah Thomas throughout this entire rivalry is feeling like, wow, I'm this 6'1" guard. You know, there was very, very little chance of me completely dominating the NBA the way I was supposed to. Sure, he was the number 2 overall pick in the 1981 NBA draft, but a 6'1" guard wasn't supposed to be the face of the NBA. Even if he did win 2 NBA championships, he wasn't going to get the respect that he deserved. He was nowhere near as entertaining to watch as Michael Jordan was, and he was not going to draw as big of a crowd as Michael Jordan. And this obviously ate away at Isiah Thomas. You know, no matter how many times he beat Michael Jordan, people were still going to root for Michael Jordan over him. And I guess that's what kind of drove him crazy to not shake Michael Jordan's hand after the 1991 season, where they finally lost to the Chicago Bulls after beating them 3 years straight. But here's what's very interesting to me. Michael Jordan would go out, and I guess you could say this is a bit of pettiness on his part as well, And I don't think this was exactly organized by Michael Jordan. I feel like this was organized by multiple players. Isiah Thomas was not only disliked by Michael Jordan, but he was disliked by Larry Bird because they had a rivalry before the Chicago Bulls came into the picture. The Detroit Pistons were feuding with the Boston Celtics, the Larry Bird-led Boston Celtics. And Magic Johnson had something against Isiah Thomas too, because apparently when Magic Johnson was diagnosed with HIV and retired from the Los Angeles Lakers following the 1991 season, well, apparently Isiah Thomas questioned Magic Johnson's sexuality. And this caused them to have a huge rift up until this one special they had back in 2017 where they hugged on NBA TV. It's really, really nice. I'd recommend you watching it. They were able to bury the hatchet, but at that time, Magic Johnson was not down with Isiah Thomas being on the Dream Team either. So you have Larry Bird, you have Michael Jordan, you have Isiah Thomas on one team, and you also have Scottie Pippen on that team as well. That's 4 players that definitely are on the same page surrounding Isiah Thomas, and this resulted in Isiah Thomas, I guess you could say, getting blackballed from the Olympic team. Now, you have to understand why this is a big deal. That 1992 Olympic team was the first year Isiah Thomas technically could make it to the Olympics and play for his team. It wasn't like it was nowadays back then where any player could just say, hey, I feel like playing in the Olympics this year by just jumping on the American team with my fellow NBA players. It wasn't like that in those days. Back then, NBA players were not allowed to represent the United States national team up until the 1992 season. So this rivalry carries on to this day. Most recently, Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas kind of had a back and forth. Isiah Thomas is really doing whatever it takes to really relish his time in the spotlight and try to define where he stands in terms of their rivalry with each other. I feel like Michael Jordan really dislikes Isiah Thomas because, well, Isiah Thomas beat him 3 years in a row. You could make the argument that Michael Jordan would have significantly more NBA championships if Isiah Thomas wasn't there to stop him for a couple of years. But that's not what ended up happening, and as a result, he's a little bit less decorated, but still one of the most decorated players in NBA history. So that's my guess as to why Michael Jordan doesn't like Isiah Thomas. I feel like Isiah Thomas is ready to move past everything, but Michael Jordan, of course, seems to be a little bit stubborn, so things are the way they are. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think about this rivalry? Do you side with Michael Jordan, or do you side with Isiah Thomas? Do you think they're both being a little bit petty, or do you think that there's a part of the story I neglected to tell? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, and if there's any other suggestions that you would like to see as for content on the channel, feel free to comment in the comment section down below, or tweet it to me on Twitter, or DM it to me on Instagram. You guys get the gist of things. I'm your boy, TheFlightMike, and I'll catch you guys in our next upload.
Well, I know it's all bullshit. Whatever he says now, you know it wasn't his true actions then. It's time enough to think about it. Or the reaction of the public that's kind of changed his perspective of it. Yeah, you can show me anything you want. There's no way you can convince me he wasn't an asshole.